Hello again. So we are going to continue to look at migration and movement in general. That theme of geography, movement in general, human environmental interaction is going to be part of this too. But we just recently investigated push and pull factors. You can still see them written on the board behind me, but I want to direct your attention to a couple of maps that I've selected from chapter 11 and chapter 3 in our textbook. So chapter 11 is the agriculture chapter, and this map shows you originally in the early years of industrialization and agriculture, when trade routes were able to be established among the different nations, and well, there weren't even nations yet in some cases, but among the different regions on the planet, the Atlantic Ocean had a monopoly on the trade routes that we're going to look at right now. Because when we talk about agriculture, industrialized agriculture, the origin is in Europe. Okay, the origin of industrialized agriculture is in Europe. Now, in the agriculture chapter, you will also find a beautiful map. It's on 2 pages worth of map. I think it's like page 320 or something like that in the 12th edition of the textbook. You will see the agricultural centers around the world, the cultural hearths for where crops began to be cultivated. But it's in Europe that the Industrial Revolution took hold, and that's why you see dominance of the Atlantic trade in the early agricultural, the second agricultural revolution. So I'm showing you this map because in Europe, there's not a whole lot, or in England, there's not a whole lot of land. And so this is a lot of where the factories were. And because farming became so much more easily practiced with the machines that the Industrial Revolution invented, the factories in England in particular were able to focus on other manufactured goods. So you see luxury markets begin. And these luxury markets produced fashions. They produced, well, everything that's shown here. Manufactured goods, textiles, that's fabrics, furniture, and other luxuries. And so these things were produced in Europe, exported to what they called the New World. It was new to them, not new to the people who already lived here. But those people who already lived here had a very, very different idea about economy, about the role of the land in the life of the community, and they did not participate in that capitalistic kind of economic system that was evolving, made possible by the Industrial Revolution. And so in chapter 3, you will see not only a conversation about migration by choice, where people decide to move from one place to the next, but also migration that happens under duress. So there might be a push factor because of war. There might be a push factor because of famine, some of the other things that I mentioned, but there are also push factors because based on this agricultural exchange, you see this really fat line right here where you coming out of Southern Africa over to the West Indies, over to the Central America and South America area of the New World. This is the slave trade. Oh, by the way, there's also gold and pepper, but it's primarily enslaved people because agriculture creates land ownership, which a lot of subsistence agricultural societies did not have before. Profit comes with surplus, and in that profit, you end up with some people with more and others with less. And this luxury market that emerged is because of the surplus of money that was available to some and not others. Thus, enslavement too, because owning a laborer is most often cheaper than paying them. That's one of the reasons why people had such large families early on, because you technically own your children, technically, and therefore they are laborers for you with a vested interest in it. So look at these routes, these trade routes from chapter chapter 11, this in the 12th edition. This is on page 336. But let's also look at the migration patterns. Oops, not that one. Well, yeah, we'll go ahead and look at this one. This is a major human migration from chapter 3, between 1500 and 1950. Okay, so this is an entire world map. So see, because of this projection, you've got the Atlantic Ocean broken up here, but you can see these areas of origin where people out of Russia, out of Europe are coming to the west. They're going east, the opposite direction around the Pacific Ocean. And remember, please, back to the third video, I think it was, or fourth video that we watched during week 5, where you learned about the gateway of India, which would be located right about there where I've got my cursor on the map there. Notice that you don't see any flow from Europe this direction across through the Mediterranean Ocean, through the Suez Canal to India at this time, because we're not talking about that route being available yet, where they have to dig a canal. We have that human environmental interaction where we modify the environment to suit our purposes. So that was one of the big deals of that gateway of India, because it allowed you by ship to come from here straight through here, and bingo, you have your doorway to the rest of the Asian continent. So that's why one of the reasons it was a big deal, and this map can help us visualize what that was all about. Okay, and so these migration routes are primarily because of jobs, primarily because of that agricultural trade, and also the economic opportunity that flows with the transportation of goods, like those luxury goods that we saw earlier, but mainly food products. We need you to work in that food industry, whether it's packing, whether it's shipping, whether it's harvesting, any number of issues that way. But because social stratification is also such a huge component of the Industrial Revolution, we did not have such vast differences between wealth and poverty in the more simplistic, less complex social systems that subsistence, agriculture, horticulture, pastoralism, foraging, those subsistence strategies did not have vast differences in social stratification, we call it. But agriculture and industrialization in particular allows for that huge gap to develop between wealth and poverty. So these folks who are moving are not merely moving for agricultural reasons. Perhaps there is domestic work that they can do. Perhaps there is factory labor. Perhaps there are simply not, there's not just one pinpointed opportunity that is the pull factor for someone to go elsewhere, but just the opportunity that's going to be available to them once they arrive. And so these are the primary routes of human, the major routes or routes, however you pronounce that, of human migration. Between this period. So we're talking about early subsistence agricultural methods on through. And so, of course, the Industrial Revolution happens smack dab in the middle, like where this word "and" is in time. That's where the Industrial Revolution happens. And so that's why you see all this flow. Okay, and so yeah, this is the picture that I was going to when I arrived at that other one. So this is the slave trade specifically. And so this comes from the chapter 3 in the 12th edition. And you can see that it's not just goods and food stuff that is exchanged here. You can see where and how the pathways are, where the majority of people arrived when they were abducted, when they were stolen from their parent cultures and literally shipped across the Atlantic Ocean into the slave trade. Now, one of the reasons why you see so much going here to this region is because agriculture and the trade associated with agriculture really opened up a door that people had never had in their culinary experiences before, and that door is for sugar. So sugar and molasses and other kinds of things, these things come from different agricultural products. Sugar cane is the one that you and I are probably the most familiar with, although you might not even know it, but the granulated sugar that so many of us love in our coffee or whatever comes primarily from sugarcane crops. And those things are produced generally in this area. So in that original picture, let me see if I can go back to it, where it says enslaved people came from this area up to North America over to this way. Molasses and sugar came from this general area also. And so with molasses and sugar came some distillation techniques, and that's where we get rum also, Jamaican rum, and all of these kinds of things that we know from this general area. Those were some of the luxury items, although there were not complex water systems to make your water clean at this time. And so adding just a little bit of a distilled spirit or even fermenting things to add to the water supply helped you and your community adjust to the things that could live in the water that could cause you to be sick. It didn't really make you adjust to them. It killed the critters that lived in the water supply in order for you to be able to drink it, to make the water potable, as we say. So there are so many different cultural changes that happened. Again, the word revolution means drastic change. And so we're talking about going from a time where salt and sugar and pepper, some basic things for most people's tables these days, we're going from a time where these things were unheard of in many parts of the world until they are globally distributed all over the world. And it really changes the culinary scene too. We're not talking about fine cuisine being developed in this phase of agriculture, not until we see that global exchange that happens later, closer in time, past that 1950s point that was in one of the other pictures I showed you, until closer to the time of the Green Revolution or the Third Agricultural Revolution that we're going to look at. You didn't really see widespread worldwide focus on haute cuisine. Okay, so this is about migration. Migration is more than just humanity, but chapter 3 focuses on human exchanges. However, remember, some of those pathways for human exchanges are only there because agricultural products needed to be exchanged and because of the social stratification, the hierarchy, the wealth, middle, and poverty that was created by these the surplus produced in agriculture and the profit produced by industrialism, and therefore people migrated to where the jobs were, mostly to where other opportunities were, or they were forced to go from one place to the next because labor was so vitally necessary, or forced migration like Indian removal and the Trail of Tears that we learn about in our Arkansas history. Those things were done in part, at least, because agricultural industrialists wanted that land. That land was more productive in the hands of the invaders than it was in the hands of the original possessors of that property, although they didn't really kind of see land ownership as a thing, really, like Europeans do. Okay, so many topics to write about for this reaction paper this week. We'll have another couple of lessons, and I hope you're enjoying it. Text me with questions. Bye.